Hi everyone! In this tutorial, I will teach you how to watercolor paint a mountain step by step, looking at 8 easy different techniques that you can try out. The first technique is a dry brush technique. I sketch in my mountain just very lightly, and then using a round brush, I load it up with just a little tiny bit of paint, not very much paint at all, and using the side, kind of scratch that paint right into the paper. I can turn my paper if it makes it a little bit easier. I'm using a phthalo blue paint mixed in with just a little bit of black, but leaving those kind of sketchy white strokes in between. And now I'm adding in some shadowy areas using a darker purple paint. So I've mixed a little bit of crimson into my blue. The next technique is a wet on wet technique. I load up my paintbrush this time with quite a bit of paint using the same middle blue. Just paint in a simple mountain shape. And while this is still wet, load up my paintbrush with the purple shadow color and then just paint shadows on one side. So I'm imagining that the light is hitting on the left side of the mountain, and so the right side of the mountain is in shadow. When these colors dry, they should blend together really nicely and give me kind of a misty effect. The next technique is a saran wrap technique using paint daubs. Again, I'm going to sketch in a simple mountain shape. This is also a wet on wet technique. So using clean water, I'm going to wet the paper, keeping each section separate. Now daub in the paint, keeping these daubs, these little areas of paint separate. You want to use the right amount of paint. Too much paint will start to blend together and make it all muddy, and not enough paint will not have enough paint on it. So it's a fun technique to try out and see how much paint is the right amount. I'm adding in daubs of purple paint on the right side to indicate shadow areas. There, that looks like just about enough. So I'm going to take my saran wrap and scrunch it up, crinkle it up there, and then lay it right into the paint, push it in, make sure I have a lot of contact. I'm going to let it dry completely, and when I take it off, we're going to see all the great textures that we end up with. The next mountain is a layering technique. So I'm using my same blue paint, but I've watered it down quite a bit, so it's very light. I'm going to let that layer completely dry before I add another layer of my mountain in on it. So the next technique is a triangle mountain. I like to call it a two-tone triangle mountain. So sketching it in, then just drawing a squiggly, zigzagging line that goes down the mountain and swoops off to one side. Fill that mountain in with the middle tone blue paint. And after it dries completely, we will go back in and add in the shadow paint, the shadow color on one side, following that same squiggly line that we painted, that we sketched in down the middle. So my layering painting is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to move on to the next technique while these two mountains are still drying. This technique is called lines and washes. And so I'm using the tip of my brush, not pushing down very hard, but I'm just creating some squiggly lines. Kind of think about that same squiggly line we just drew down the center of the mountain. So think about that. Now I'm going to rinse out my paintbrush and using just the paint that's already on the paper, draw out those lines and pull out the color a little bit to make some nice soft washes. And adding in a little bit more shadow and definition into some of these areas. And then I'll move on, working one section of the mountain at a time. Now moving on, adding another mountain, just repeating these same shapes, these little squiggly lines, rinsing out my brush and pulling out the paint to make some nice soft washes. And then finally, I add in some of the purple shadows to kind of add more detail and definition to this mountain. This mountain, my layer mountain, is dry, so I'm going to use that middle tone blue to make another layer right in front. I'm not watering it down this time, so the color will definitely be darker. I'm going to let this second layer dry completely again before I add a third layer. You can add as many layers here as you would like. Moving back to the two-tone triangle mountain, I'm just following that same squiggly line that I made. And if you can't see your line, just go ahead and make a new line. Just keep it kind of nice and loose. And then fill in the right side of the mountain. Now I'm going to make a silhouetted mountain. For this one, I'm going to paint in the sky first and then paint a nice dark silhouetted mountain in front of it. So focusing on the sky, which is going to be darker at the horizon line and then get lighter as it moves up into the sky. So I rinsed out my paintbrush and I'm adding a little bit of clean water in to make that transition. And add a little bit more pigment down towards the bottom as well. And then I'm going to let that sky dry completely before I go back and add my mountain in over the top of it. The last technique is a free form mountain range. I'm thinking about lights and darks and just using nice, easy, loose strokes. This is a really great technique to use if I'm looking at a mountain or a picture of a mountain. Using the middle tone blue, just making shapes of dark and then watering that down and pulling out that color into washed out shapes. And really thinking about just one section of the mountain at a time. And repeating on each section, and then finally going back in and adding some darker shadowy areas and then pulling out that purple into some nice soft washes as well. Using purple paint, I'm going to go ahead and add in that final layer. And like I said, you can add more layers to this if you'd like. I'm just gonna leave it with 3 layers for this demonstration. Finally, going back in and adding a nice dark silhouetted mountain right in front of this sky. Keeping my lines nice and loose, imagining there's trees or craggy rocks on the top of this mountain, giving the edge some texture. I've mixed together black along with the blue and the crimson I've been using in the rest of these paintings. Remember, watercolors will dry a little bit lighter than they are when you put them on the paper. So I'm going to add a little bit more pigment here and just make this a really nice dark shadowy mountain in the foreground. And pulling up this saran wrap, you can see all the really great texture there. So lastly, I can go back and erase all my pencil lines and make any changes to these. But keep practicing all of these techniques. As you can see, there are many different ways to paint a mountain. I hope you have fun trying them all out. Thanks for watching.